you want to treat it like some sort of cross between a public speaking engagement and an audition.
You have to prepare the way you would prepare for an interview.
Because you really want to own kind of what was your contribution.
In general, it's understanding what a behavioral interview is all about. And there is information online about what behavioral interviews are. There are videos out there on YouTube that will give examples of what a behavioral interview looks like. Not necessarily specifically the type of interview that the federal government's doing, but it'll give you a sense of what the difference is between a behavioral interview and traditional job interviews.
One thing for both the written and the in-person that I see some people do more than others, let's say, is kind of project themselves. And I know it's difficult. I think a lot of people that come to public service are modest people. They're humble and they're inherently modest about their accomplishments. But this is not necessarily the best venue for that.
To be prepared for everything. The questions, because it's different than a typical interview because you don't have a job description, it's much more looking at the competencies, the motivation, leadership, interpersonal skills that someone's bringing. So they need to be prepared for those kinds of situational questions that are more general. So that can be challenging for students because there's not a specific job description that says, oh, I'm looking for an analyst, tell me about your analysis skills. It's tell me about a situation and how you handled this. So really helping a student come up with in advance questions that might be thrown out to them, and there's obviously some study guides that people can look at and they look at with other previous students, but really thinking about, and I definitely advise students have a lot of answers. I always talk about it's almost like a file cabinet that you can quickly in your head pull out an answer that's relevant depending on the question.
For that, I tell people to really think through their accomplishments, what they have done and their role in that. And so there are different methods that you can prepare, like the STAR method, I think situation, task, action, result, and really approach each concrete example of their accomplishments thinking within that kind of STAR framework. Because you really want to own kind of what was your contribution, what did you have to do, what were the results, and that will be really meaningful for that in-person interview.
And I hate to see people that are high caliber sell themselves short, both in their writing, about their accomplishments, but also in little things like their body language and the way they articulate themselves and communicate. I can certainly say in government, it's a knowledge industry, people are extremely smart and mission driven. It's not enough to just be smart. That's not going to be enough to get through this process. That's not going to be enough to be a PMF. You really have to express yourself and communicate in a way that you can be heard.
If you're doing any sort of presentation, practicing and being prepared on doing an actual presentation, simply having some sort of PowerPoint and reading directly from it is not going to be sufficient. You need to be able to be dynamic in the presentation style that you're doing, and also being clear, concise, and succinct in what you're trying to deliver. Because if you're meeting with a policy person or somebody on the Hill, you may have all of 30 seconds to a minute to talk to them, so you need to be concise.
On the group one, it's difficult, right? Because a lot of times people don't know, should I try to assert myself? Should I look like I'm really cooperative? Should I, be the timekeeper? I think people generally have those kinds of questions in group settings. To my mind, you shouldn't really be too contrived about that. In other words, I think you should be cognizant of whether you're participating. If you're too quiet, that is not a good thing.
The goal is not just to show off how smart you are, but the goal is also to show that you can work well with others. And so I had the experience of someone who was kind of always trying to get in front of everybody else to say something, and I thought, wow, I would really not enjoy working with that person on an ongoing basis, and I think that's probably what the panel thought too. So to the degree you bring knowledge and expertise, but also kind of a facilitative, cooperative style, I think is helpful. And be confident, be relaxed, be who you are. I think sort of as with all things.